Tell him, McCluskey. Tell him what time it is.
Little Hen says it's time to rock and roll.
All you people are so scared of me.
Come quietly or there will be trouble.
Man, that's just me.
I'm Batman.
This is Sparta!
There is a tiger in the bathroom!
I'm an excellent driver.
If it bleeds, we can kill it.
Pop quiz, hotshot.
Keep the change, you filthy animal.
What songs do you know?
Songs?
Yes, songs.
Swanee River.
I love that song.
It happens to be my favorite.
Sing me the chorus.
No, certainly not.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Monday Movie Show. It's special because of a couple of reasons. One, it's not Monday, and two, it's a British movie special, and I'm not on my own. I'm not with Andy this week. I'm with, now this will get confusing, another Stuart, but he's from a fantastic show called From Page to Screen. He also does a British version of the show as well.
Yeah, this could get a little bit confusing as well because we've both got unusual accents. So, you know, a little bit of a battle of twang. But yeah, no, it's good to be on one of your shows, Stuart.
Eventually, yes. Because I did your show, your British movie show as well, and so I thought I would return the favour. I can't even speak tonight.
Fine. wasn't it Andy that was having the talking issues the other night? His voice was getting a bit the old Bryan Adams there.
Yeah, well, we both have issues when it comes to reviewing films or talking about them. We always trip up on our own words and forget what we're going to say or even forget actors' names, etc. So it's nothing new. If people listen to the show, and I hope a lot of people listen to the show, they're probably used to us now. So the whole reason behind this show is each month what I've decided to do is do a special edition of the Monday Movie Show. Last month we did a Halloween special. And this month, because the British movie industry has started to find a bit of headway over the last few years, I thought I would do a show which looked at the British movie industry and what we bring now to cinema, not just the kind of films that we made, how we started in the world of cinema, and what influences do we have on the cinema now. So the reason why I got Stuart on also is, over the last, how long ago did you start the British movie show?
The British movie show's been running for about half a dozen episodes, so maybe 5 or 6. Previous to that, I've done the From Page to Screen shows for about 130 episodes. The British thing I decided to do, mainly because of Twitter. And what I realised was that a lot of people were talking to me on Twitter, which is always nice, and a lot of these people write British films, they direct British films, and they star in British films, and it sort of kicked me up the rear end and reminded me that I should actually watch more British films than I am, seeing as I'm from Britain. So that's where that all came about. I'm enjoying doing the British movie show.
So it was just like speaking to a lot of people on Twitter was the reason why you decided to do a sort of like a spin-off show which just focused on British films.
Pretty much. I mean, the British film industry, it doesn't have the same sort of advertising budget or production budget as the US. So I thought, you know what, I don't think I'm going to single-handedly cure all the problems or help films become other things. But I just thought I'd give something back because, I mean, I'm 41 years old. I've watched thousands upon thousands of films, and it's kind of nice to just recommend films to other people. I mean, you and I have spoke to US Danny Dyer fan on Twitter, and that poor woman's probably got lists upon lists of films that you've recommended to her, and I have, that she might not have seen. So it's nice to do that for as many people as possible.
Yeah, for me, over the last few years, the only reason why I've started to latch more onto British films and European cinema, etc., is because I'm starting to become a bit sick of the way the American studios treat films. They always think that it's best to throw a lot of money at a film and then hope for the best. And I think with the British movie industry, in my opinion, with us having a smaller budget, we can take bigger risks.
Exactly. I mean, you take a really, really big American film like Men in Black 3 and you put it up against a British film like GBH or Hard Boiled Sweets. A lot of people will not have heard of those last two films. Everybody's heard of Men in Black 3, but quality-wise, you know, even the credit sequence on GBH and Hard Boiled Sweets pretty much trounces the entire Men in Black 3 film, in my opinion. But because of the sheer amount of money that companies like Sony can chuck at these things, we don't stand a chance. So we just sort of get snowballed.
Do you think that we influence American cinema as enough with the films that we do?
I mean, you and I have had this discussion where you have suggested that maybe Britain takes it a little bit too safe sometimes, where they just focus on urban dramas, I believe you classed them as. And I think Britain does what it knows it can get away with. And as you sort of mentioned on my show, it would be nice maybe once every year to do a really big, like a Ridley Scott, not Hollywood, not American type film, but a British science fiction film. You mentioned Sunshine before, Danny Boyle one. Just to do a really, really big film that kind of nudges America to say hello. And I suppose Skyfall's kind of done that, but is that a British film or is it an American film? It's a bit of a hybrid. But I think Britain should do a really, really big film every year. Take a chance, as you put it.
Yeah, the thing with Skyfall is that I think it's probably like 90% British and 10% American, 10% because of the studio behind it. The rest is quintessentially British. You've got a British character in James Bond. You've got a British director in Sam Mendes. You've got a British actor, and it is a very, very British film. And so I think that's probably a good step in the right direction with the amount of money that Skyfall has made. It will show that we can make big films as long as we get a little bit of help. And I think over the next few years, we still need that help. But we'll eventually be able to get it into a stride. And if we can get out of this recession that we're in as well, then it'll be much more helpful.
Definitely. I mean, you look a few years ago where Danny Boyle did Slumdog Millionaire. That very, very nearly went straight to DVD. But it managed to, get a few Oscars. So I think Americans are aware of us. I just think they see us as a flea on a dog sometimes. They're like, they're not really going to knock out our film industry. But I think Britain are capable. You look at some of the talent that has unfortunately gone over to the States. Your Anthony Hopkins, Sir Anthony Hopkins, Sir Ridley Scott. All of these sort of people have gone over to America and made one hell of a difference over there. I just kind of wish they could get the support over here so that they could stay here and do what they do for us.
Yeah, back to the idea that we need to take a bit more of a chance. Do you think that we do play it safe? Because we have spoken about the fact that I would say around about at least 30 films from the industry over the last for each year is a sort of like a gritty British drama. We seem to do a lot of them, and you can probably see that each week we might get one or two or three new ones, gritty dramas, and we do them really well. But it seems that that's all we're churning out on the small budgets rather than trying to do something. Do you think that we rely too heavily on that genre?
I think we're restricted by the budgets. I mean, you said it yourself. It's like, do we do what we do on those small budgets? It's very cheap to make an urban drama, about kids, something like Sket, which is a bunch of kids running around being horrible and beating each other up type thing. But you look at something like GBH, which I don't know what the budget was, but it wasn't a lot, and that film seems far more epic than it was. But there was still no, big spaceships or blazing gun battles or anything like that, because unfortunately they cost money. And I'm sure there is the odd example out of there. I mean, Hard Boiled Sweets, which I interviewed the guy who wrote and directed that, a guy called David Hughes. He wouldn't tell me what the budget was, but he said it was tiny. It was virtually nothing. Yeah, you watch that film, it could go up against a Hollywood film. But it was a gritty drama. I think we do what we do because of the restrictions that we've got. And somehow we just need to get rid of those budget restrictions. And
yeah,
then,
you look at films like Attack the Block, and that's sort of like it's an amalgamation of genres. It's a gritty drama, and it's a bit of a comedy, and it's a bit of a horror, and it's science fiction, and that film it did pretty decent in the States. But I'm guessing Joe Cornish had a small budget, and look what he did with it. The special effects, especially on the monsters, the fact that they were real rather than being CGI, was brilliantly done.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I loved about Attack the Block. I watched it for the first time earlier on this week on the Film 4 British Connection thing, and there was an interview before that with Joe Cornish and some of the cast, and that's when I learned that these creatures were in fact practical creatures. It wasn't CGI because he doesn't like CGI or wasn't able to do it, and it comes off better in the film that these things are real. So, you know, you can work around some of the restrictions. It's just sometimes not very easy. Not when you're
Yeah,
trying to compete with avatars and, you know, the major films that come out, like your
yeah.
Men in Blacks, unfortunately.
And you've just mentioned film 4 there, and I think personally, I've said this before, that if it wasn't for film 4, then I don't think we would be in the sort of good state that we're in at the moment.
No, agreed. Agreed. I mean, Film 4 are not just a TV channel nowadays that just shows films. They go way, way back, which I think you've got some information on that. But I remember the very early 90s with films like Shopping and Shallow Grave. To me, that's when Film 4 really took off. I mean, they were going even before that in the late 80s with like My Beautiful Laundrette and Morris and all this sort of stuff. Been around a while.
Yeah, they have, and I think that the best thing about Film 4 is they take a chance. They do take a chance on the films that they create. A lot of the movies, there is a good mixture, like you've just mentioned there. You've got things like Trainspotting that Film 4 was involved in, but then you look at things like Sunshine, and then they don't make very many films each year, but the films that they make are of high quality. And
Certainly are.
If they get the help with the National Lottery as well, because you were saying that the National Lottery started in '96, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think people in boardrooms around 96 were thinking, right, how are we going to make this work? How can we take some money from the National Lottery and put it into film production? Because at that time, there was, I mean, I did know the figures, but there was not that many films per year coming out in the very early 90s and late 80s. On some years, it was down to about 15 films coming out, and that is shocking. You know, for a country to produce just 15 films a year.
It's really shocking, because a stat that I gave you, which is brilliant to read, that in 2010 the British movie industry made £1.115 billion, which is a huge amount. It doesn't sound a lot, but for the kind of country that we are, where we've got around about 65 million people living in the country, then that's a huge amount of money.
And especially with the amount of money that they probably spend on the budgets of these films. I mean, Skyfall, as we've mentioned a couple of times, £200 million budget. There's not really that many British films that get a £200 million or dollar budget. Very few, I would have thought.
I think a lot of films, if they got 10% of that, they would be happy.
Yes.
A £20 million budget, they would be ecstatic. I'm guessing you look at Ilmana's £100,000 budget on that. That's a tiny budget that it got, and so even if films get that, at least he was a first time director, Ben Drew, who did the film, and he directed a film for the first time using £100,000. If you ask an American director to do that, they would cry. You look at horror films like Paranormal Entity 4. That's one of those really bad spin-off movies from the Paranormal Activity films. And that had a budget of $500,000, and it's a direct-to-DVD movie. And you look at, like I said, you look at Ilmana's £100,000. The difference, the gaps, and Ben Drew's film is miles better than Paranormal Entity is.
Agreed. I mean, I didn't know the budget figure for Ilmana's, and I've watched that film twice within the past month. That's an amazing job. And you look at something like London to Brighton, which to me is one of the best British films I've seen in years, from 2006. $500,000 to make, which is fine. You can make 5 Ilmanas for that. But,
yeah. Well, the main stories that are in Ilmanas, there's like 6 different interleaving stories, so technically it's 6 films wrapped into one. So there's like 6 films for £100,000 there. 6 short films, and you made it for £100,000. I think the best one is a zombie film called Colin, which is made for less than £50.
Yep.
A movie made for £50. It's just, you can barely buy much for £50 these days. You can't even buy an iPod for that. So it's just ridiculous that somebody can make a film for £50.
Yeah, you go to a supermarket and do maybe 3 or 4 days shopping for a couple of you. You're going to spend your £50 that way. I mean, that's pretty much the same cost as it is to buy Black Ops 2. So to put that in perspective, one video game plus a little bit of change.
We're obviously not saying that anybody can make a film for £50 because I don't think it's possible. You'll need to have at least a good idea, and you need to have the equipment, obviously. But the guy who did it, I can't remember who the director was. He did it. It must have just been an idea that he had in his head and thinking, I wonder if we could do that as an experiment. And evidently the experiment worked because it did pretty decent. He managed to get it into as many cinemas as he possibly could, but it did pretty decent.
I mean, there's a film, I've mentioned it already, called Hard Boiled Sweets, and that was written by David Hughes, and it was inspired by a short film that he did a few years previous called The Girl and a Gun. You can get this thing on iTunes. And the short film is starring Ian Hart, who was in Backbeat, and he was in, what was the horse racing one that got cancelled in America? Was it Luck? By HBO. It's got Paul Freeman in it, all sorts. £250 that thing cost, that short. And it then enabled David Hughes to get his foot in the door and get Hard Boiled Sweets made. So it's, £250 still pretty good to make a film.
Yeah, and what about the directors that we have? And you look at Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott is probably deemed from science fiction nerds or science fiction fans as sort of like the god when it comes to sci-fi and big, huge, massive films. And he's from the UK.
Yep.
Paul Anderson, even though people might not like him, who's done the Resident Evil series, he's done Death Race and Event Horizon, which I know Andy doesn't like, who's in the chat at the moment, and I love Event Horizon. I think it's a brilliant little film. And Paul Anderson as well, he's broken out and managed to make big films. And there is British directors in this country which I think could survive in the States because the amount of films that they make. One of my favourite directors is Neil Marshall.
Yes, exactly. Who's done some phenomenal films. I think my favourite of his would probably be Dog Soldiers. Most definitely.
Yeah, Andy has just put something in the chat here, and he said, if British movies try to copy anyone, as so many usually do, they shouldn't look to copy America. They should look to the French movies, as they are more similar and doing amazing things. The Artist, Unforgettable, Rust and Bone, etc. The fact that the government shut down the UK Film Council in the last couple of years didn't help either.
No, I agree with that. Don't copy the Americans. Let the Americans do what they do, and just we copy somebody else or learn from somebody else is probably a better phrase.
Yeah, because I did your show on Sunday, and I was talking about European cinema, and I think we should copy our European brethren because what they're producing is miles better than what America is producing. There's a film called Iron Sky, which was done by two French people, and they've been trying to get the budget together for that film for quite a few years, going to Cannes, going to a lot of these film festivals to try and get the budget together. They managed to get $5 million together to shoot the film, and it's a really good film. And so we need to sort of look at the European side of cinema and, in a way, copy them and try to do our own versions of them, which I think we are slowly doing.
I mean, looking at the sort of British film industry, how far back does your interest in British film or your knowledge of British film go? I think mine, other than the odd Ealing comedy which I've seen in the past few years, I think mine is probably the 80s/90s and beyond. Do you go beyond that? I mean, I like British films, but I've only ever seen 1-2 carry-on films.
Oh, I love
and I've very few Hammer films. I need to.
I love the Carry On films. I love the Carry On films, and they go back to 1958 with the first Carry On film. So you look far as back as that, and you look even back in to 1929 when Alfred Hitchcock did his first film called Blackmail, and it's often seen as to be the first British talkie, as it was known back then, the first British sound film, because we used to do a lot of silence films. I did a little bit of research looking back on when we started in the film industry, and our first moving picture was shot in 1888. And after that, 1 year later in 1889, that was the first film we did on celluloid, and it was in Hyde Park in London by William Fries Green. So we go back as far as the French do.
Very nice. So we've been around a little while then.
Oh yeah, we've been around longer than the American film industry, to be honest.
And I think we forget that. But who do you think is to blame? I mean, we've sort of had a slight pop at the budgets, and like the film council being disbanded. Me personally, I kind of blame the people that watch films, and that includes me to a certain extent. I mean, I'm repenting for my sins now, but at one point I wouldn't go near a British film because I thought they were all going to be period dramas or Gandhi or whatever. And I mean, watching those as a child, you're just not interested. You know, I don't care about period dramas, not bother with that. And even today, people that come in the place where I work will put a film down sometimes if it's British. Oh, I don't want that. I want Men in Black, or I want Cosmopolis, or I want the new Harry Potter film, or something like that. They are sort of kind of emotionally blackmailed by the big advertising budgets and the magazine and the glossy posters and the big cardboard stand-ups and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So.
It seems that the bigger American films get more advertisements over here than our own films that we create. For example, there's a film out in the cinema called Love Bites, which is a British sort of like werewolf film, and it's been panned by critics, and I could guess that it was going to be panned by critics. And I was having a look at the showings of my cinema, and it's only been in the cinema for a week and it's getting taken out already because it didn't make the top 10. So not very many people have gone to see it, but it's down to distributing them in cinemas. Like I said to you on the show I did with you, I think there should be a minimum amount of cinemas that British films should be distributed into, a minimum of at least 100 cinemas. And a cinema should be forced to show at least one screening a day of a British film, just to give it a chance.
Yeah. I mean, that sort of plan was tried years and years ago, and it was taken to the owners of the multiplexes, which were, struggling at the time. And I think multiplexes in general still are. That's why they fill it with 400 prints of Twilight or whatever. And their logic is, why would we put a British film that nobody's going to watch when we can put Twilight Part whatever and everybody's going to go and watch it? And they pretty much poo-pooed that entire idea. But I agree with that. It should be a case of, right, you've got 12 screens. One of those is a British screen. You can do what you want with the other 11, but that is a British screen.
Yeah, my cinema has got 28 showings of Twilight from Friday. 28 showings. It's a 12-screen cinema, and they have 28 showings just dedicated to one film. Even Skyfall didn't get that. Skyfall, I think, got some 18 showings. So Twilight is getting 10 more showings than Skyfall.
That's really, really saddening, isn't it, really? It's just like the most depressing thing ever.
Yeah, it is really, really depressing. Andy, he says in the live chat that he doesn't know very much about British cinemas apart from the Bond series, which is the first British series to take more than $1 billion, and the Carry On films, which I could probably do a show on my own about Carry On films. I'm obsessed with them.
I would listen to that because I've seen the clips and Sid James doing his laugh and Kenneth Williams and Barbara Windsor and all that sort of stuff, but for some reason just haven't. They're not really that accessible, those films now. I can't remember last time I walked into a shop and saw a big bunch of Carry On films. I know there is a box set out there somewhere with them all on, but I just haven't come across it. I've not seen it anywhere.
The newspapers, when they used to do a couple of years ago, when they used to get a free DVD with them, I remember the Sun newspaper did a special where they gave away Carry On films with the newspaper itself.
Nice.
And so I think I've got nearly all of the Carry On films. I don't have Carry On Columbus because that's the worst one by far. It's a horrible, horrible film. But I love Carry On films. I
remember that one coming out in the video store was crazy with Carry On Columbus. People brought it back and went, "That's awful. Give me my money back."
It is. It's god awful. But I love. They remind me of sort of like how easy it was to make a film because they are very simple ideas. The Carry On films, and they make me laugh. Even I prefer the black and white ones over the colour ones, but they do make me laugh.
Do you think they could bring those back?
They tried to bring them back. They had the idea with their Carry On London, but it's just never been able to be shot. They've tried to bring the Carry On series back. I don't think it would work now. I think it would have a bit of a problem because you look at films like Keith Lemon the movie and The In-Betweeners. They're sort of, in a way, I think the directors looked at them and thought they are sort of like the Carry On films of now, but they are awful films. Andy reviewed Keith Lemon the film. Unfortunately, I was hoping that I would skip that movie by the end of the year, but it's out just before Christmas.
Yep, and you're not allowed to.
Yeah, I've got to watch it, so I've got to review it at the end of the year, so I feel sorry for people who listen to that show, because they're going to be deafened with me absolutely hating it, because if Andy hated it, and it's very rare that me and him agree on films, then I'm going to really despise it. Because I don't like those kind of films, and I don't find him funny.
No, I don't. I'm one of the only people that just gets annoyed when Celebrity Juice pops on. I just turn it off. I don't get it. Not my humour.
Yeah, Hammer films as well. I think, personally, I think Hammer was the company, out of all of them, was responsible for our dip in films, because in the 80s, American studios just didn't want to put any more money into films that we did. And Hammer films sort of like built up the movie industry along with Alfred Hitchcock and Bond and Carry On films in a way. And they used to make some fantastic films, and then they just went and screwed it all up in the 70s by doing the pornographic side of horror, and we didn't need that, and that's the reason why the American studios left, I thought. And now Hammer has decided to come back. They've resurrected themselves, and what they've decided to do over the last few years is decide to concentrate on smaller films, and The Woman in Black was probably their most successful film they've ever done.
It was. I mean, that film was very, very successful in Britain. I mean, it did quite well in the States as well. I know a lot of people over here had issues with Daniel Radcliffe's character in it, thinking, well, he just looks like Harry Potter. I had no issue at all with that. I saw Daniel Radcliffe playing the character who's playing in it, so I quite enjoyed that film. Very reminiscent of The Others, which I enjoyed as well. Not a British film, but still good. Yeah,
and people also forget that we're not just really good at making films. Our special effects houses as well. You look at Andy Serkis, who opened his own motion capture studio. He's a British actor, but because he was in Lord of the Rings and he played Smeagol and he was working with Weta, he opened his own motion capture studio, and now he does the motion capture for a lot of films. Rise of the Planet of the Apes or Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, the sequel when it comes out. He's helped it there, and we're really good with special effects in the 70s and 80s. If it wasn't for us, I don't think we would have gotten brilliant special effects in films like Aliens or Superman or Batman even.
No, agreed. I mean, Batman shot in Pinewood. So was it Pinewood it was shot in? Definitely shot in Britain. Pretty sure it was Pinewood.
Yeah, and a lot of American studios also are coming over here to shoot films as well. There's World War Z. Some scenes were shot in Scotland. And the next Fast and the Furious film, some scenes are getting shot in the UK. So,
that'll be the scenes with the rain clouds, probably, won't it? So we'll watch for that in Fast 6.
It helps our industry when we're starting to get big studios looking to shoot films in the UK rather than just making a film like a big American film in the UK kind of thing, and it injects more money into the industry, and so then we can take more chances.
No, agreed. I mean, I've been around Pinewood Studios, and that is a seriously impressive layout. I've never seen such an overwhelming, sound stages and stuff like that. I was around the time they were shooting Die Another Day, so I managed to stick my head into the Ice Castle set as they were building that. So it's like, wow. And a lot of people watch films and they look at them and they go, I don't like it. Dismiss it really, really quickly. When you see how much work and how much time goes into a film, you kind of learn to appreciate it a little bit more. And I think that's why I enjoy British films a little bit more, just to give them a bit of a boost, I think, because there's a hell of a lot of hard work goes into them.
Over the last few years, who would you see as being the best British director?
Oh, I mean, it's probably easier saying, am I allowed to count ones that have gone over to the States? Because it would probably be Ridley Scott or Tony Scott would be my choices of the proper names. I mean, Tony Scott, who obviously we mentioned Ridley Scott, Top Gun, Days of Thunder, Crimson Tide, Man on Fire. The list is endless. Fortunately, Tony's not with us anymore, but Ridley Scott made an absolute ton of money with Prometheus. I know a lot of people didn't like the film. I did, but it made a ton of change. Who's the best British director? I've seen a few. Let's say David Hughes, who did what he did for a really low budget. There's a guy called Paul Tatner who did Rise and Fall of a White Collar Hooligan. And what I love about these British people, though, these directors, don't care how you try and speak to an American director online, doesn't happen. But you try and speak to a British director, these guys will give you all the time in the world. So they are just genuinely nice folk. I mean, have you got any opinions on who you would class?
Neil Marshall, which I've already mentioned because I adore Dog Soldiers. Dog Soldiers, I can watch that numerous amount of times, and it's a funny comedy horror. It's a brilliant, brilliant film. The Descent as well from Neil Marshall is. I don't get scared easily because I've said this numerous amount of times. I watch horror films like anybody would watch a TV program like The News.
Yeah.
So I think that The Descent is one of those films where it is generally creepy. If somebody can make a claustrophobic movie like that, and it is a generally creepy film, and he also did sort of like he's lost his way a little bit with Doomsday, but it's still an entertaining film.
It is, so, but it's definitely not up there with Dog Soldiers or The Descent, though, is it? Doomsday is more of a I'm just going to spit out a popcorn movie for the fans, whereas The Descent and Dog Soldiers are right. Here's what I can do: watch it and be impressed.
I think with Doomsday, it was. I think the studio just said, well, because you've done so well with Dog Soldiers and The Descent, we're going to at least give you a chance to make a film for yourself. So I think he was making films for the fans, and then he decided to make a film for himself. Christopher Smith as well, who did Severance, who did Creep.
Yeah.
So Triangle as well. It's a mind-twisting film, Triangle, but I love Triangle, and Christopher Smith is another brilliant director. You look at Gareth Evans as well, and Gareth Edwards, one who did Monster, the other one who did The Raid. And they're from the UK, where Gareth Evans is from Wales, and they're brilliant directors. So, personally, my top one is Neil Marshall, because I think he's a god. I love everything that Neil Marshall does. And Paul Anderson, I'll give him a bit of a break because the Resident Evil films are quite fun to watch.
I really like Paul Anderson. That's one of the first British films I saw when I realised I liked them was Shopping by Paul Anderson, and I like the Resident Evil movies because they're just fun. You know, you're not really going to see "And the Oscar Goes To" unless they get him mixed up with Mr. Magnolia. But I like his films. Another name to throw into the mix: Duncan Jones. Not done a lot of films, but Source Code and Moon. Very good.
They're fantastic films. As Andy's just said also, what about people in front of the screen, the actors and actresses? Who do you think has been not just the rise in talent over the last few years, but helped the British movie industry with their acting? Who do you think is our best crop of actors?
Going sort of back a slight generation, you've got your Anthony Hopkins, your Kenneth Branaghs. Going back even further than that, you've got Olivier and whatnot. But now there's a lot of talent that is ready to rise up to the thing. I mean, your Nick Naverns, Scott Williams, a lot of names that most people go, I haven't heard of them, but you kind of will.
Yeah, Andy's just thrown quite a few names there. Michael Fassbender, Ewan McGregor, Emily Blunt, Colin Firth, Gary Oldman. That's just like, if you got
Daniel
them
Radcliffe.
in one... Yeah, if you got them in one film, that would be like the ultimate film. Look at Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and the amount of acting quality in that film. Even Tom Hardy, I think is a brilliant actor, and I'll let him off with the film This Means War because that film's absolutely atrocious.
It's terrible, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, but he's done so many really good films prior to that. I've let him off with that. Every actor's allowed a bit of a slip up every now and again, and it's just a lot. We have some fantastic talent. I'm glad also that American studios have stepped away from the fact that we play brilliant bad guys, because we do.
Yeah.
But we've also got actors who can be brilliant good guys as well.
But you look at something like the Chris Nolan Batman films, and Chris Nolan, and then you've got Christian Bale, Brit, Michael Caine, Brit, Tom Hardy was in there, Brit, Cillian Murphy in the first one, or Cillian Murphy, however he's pronounced it this week, Brit. You know, that film is just loaded with British talent. Very, very... And that's just one trilogy. Lord of the Rings trilogy, Sean Bean, and so on.
Who dies a lot.
John Rhys Davis is in there. Ian McKellen. It's just endless. Andy Serkis.
Yeah.
So there is a lot in there. I think we just don't sort of realise that they're all British, because they're everywhere, taking over the world. Just need to do it a bit faster.
So, what do you think the future holds for the British movie industry?
I would like to see it do what you sort of suggested, not just because you suggested it, but just to see a few more films breaking out and ending up in the charts would be nice. I mean, you look at the top 10s, you guys do it each week, and how many British films are actually in that chart. I know it when I go into work and look at the top 10, you think, well, where are some of these films that I know are really, really good? Ill Manners has probably dropped like a rock, but it shouldn't. It's probably been replaced by what to expect when you're expecting or something like that.
You look at this week's UK box office top 10, which I'll not go over, but from what I can see, if you look at Taken 2, has got Liam Neeson in it, so he's Irish, so it counts.
Yep.
And you have 3 because you've got the Sapphires, which has got Chris O'Dowd in it, so he's again Irish. Taken 2 with Liam Neeson in it, and Skyfall.
Yep.
And that's it. The rest are either American. There's one French film in the top 10 as well, but the rest are typical American films.
I'd like to sort of see, I mean, the social networking side of things has been a massive help. Things like Twitter, websites, podcasts. I mean, I get a lot of my movie recommendations, not just from your show, because I'll sit there and write them down and go, I'll watch that one, but various other shows as well. And I know people get recommendations from mine. So I think it's one of the best forms of advertising that they can use, and it doesn't really cost anything. So that can be a very, very big weapon against like big studios.
Exactly.
Not that they're looking to take out the studios, but just to get a little bit more money to spend on films and so on, snowball it into a nice movie economy.
Yeah, and if you could choose, I'm not going to ask you to choose a specific amount because that's not fair. Like, choose the 3 best films you've seen, British films you've seen in the last 5 years, but choose a couple of films that you think shine above everything else.
I would choose Hard-Boiled Sweets, which I've mentioned a couple of times. Very, very unusual title, but the director summed it up to me. He said it's about a bunch of bad people doing bad things, just for the wrong reasons. So it's a crime drama, but it's not quite. I would choose GBH, directed by a guy called Simon Phillips. And I would choose London to Brighton. London to Brighton is a phenomenal film. Have you heard of Angus Thongs and Angus? What's the Perfect Snogging one?
Yeah, Angus Thongs and Perfect Snogging. Yeah.
Yes, it's the girl that's in that, and I didn't realize it was her until I actually looked her up on IMDb, and I'm like, my God, that's the same girl. London to Brighton is a very, very harsh film, but it's a phenomenal piece of filmmaking. The guy then went on to make The Cottage, which I wasn't overly impressed with. That had Andy Serkis. Didn't like it. But London to Brighton was his first film and one hell of a debut. So GBH, London to Brighton, Hard-Boiled Sweets would be mine. What about yourself? What would you...
I would have to throw Tyrannosaur into that, because that is a harsh film to watch, but it's absolutely brilliant. It's a brilliant, brilliant film. Eden Lake, which is... especially the ending. When I go to see horror films or any kind of film like that, it's very rare that you see a negative ending in a film. All the endings are always positive. They always get the serial killer or whatever. It's very rare that you see a negative ending. That has a negative ending. The ending in that is really depressing. But the film is so fantastic, but it is brutal.
Oh, it is. That's like somebody beating you up for an hour and a half and then finishing you off with a hammer, isn't it, that film? It is very, 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 very harsh, but very, very good.
Yeah, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy is probably the best ensemble cast film we've ever done. Where I think the best ensemble cast of people that we will probably ever see, because if you look at Steven Soderbergh's films, he gets a load of actors in his movies, but they suck badly.
Yes,
to be honest.
He gets a good cast with a really, really naff script. He needs to sort of do what Tinker Tailor did and get a really, really good cast with a really, really good script.
Yeah, and so Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Senna's got a British roots, even though it's not about a British driver, but it's done by Asif Kapaldi, who's a British director. And so Senna is the best documentary I've seen in a very long time. It's a brilliant, brilliant film. And even if you just look at Shaun of the Dead, Shaun of the Dead is a genius little film. So Shaun of the Dead as well. And I have to say a Neil Marshall film, and if I had to choose one, it would be The Descent, because I think that's probably his best film.
Yeah, I'd go for Dog Soldiers. That way we're guaranteed 2 of them in there for Neil Marshall. But I'd chuck in something like Cockney versus Zombies as well, which was just funny as hell. That made me laugh.
They're one of the best comedies this year.
Easily.
Definitely. Yeah. I think I've only seen 2 other films, comedy-wise, that I've actually laughed at. And that's being honest. Every single comedy film I've seen, I've not laughed at.
All I'm saying is, Baby in a Pram. That's all I need to say, and anybody who's seen that will just chuckle. Baby in a Pram.
Cockneys versus Zombies, but hoping that the British movie industry sort of like thrives, and we are taking a step in the right direction. I think
I would say
push ourselves a little bit more.
The industry is in a far better state than it was maybe like 10 years ago. There's far more films coming out now than I remember there being, and I just hope it keeps doing that, but doesn't the quality doesn't go down. It's to either maintain or go up a little bit.
Yep, so that's it for this British movie special. Now, thank you, Stuart, for joining me.
Thank you, Stuart, for having me.
That's weird, that, isn't it?
Like the two Ronnies, but different.
Yep. Where can people find details about you and the shows that you do?
If you go onto Google and type in the word From Page to Screen, and that's one word, and it's the number 2, not the word 2, that will pretty much give you everything. I mean, that's my Twitter handle. It's my facebook.com/From Page to Screen. If you type in From Page to Screen on what am I looking for? On iTunes, it brings up the regular movie show that I do, as well as the British movie show. So just From Page to Screen is pretty much like the keyword, and it'll bring everything up that I do.
Yeah, it's very similar to us. If you type in Monday Movie Show, you will get our YouTube page, our iTunes page, SoundCloud, everywhere where we're at, and include our site, which is mondaymovieshow.co.uk. We will be back as normal on Monday, probably slightly later because there's very few films out, and we're probably only going to do one show on Monday. And me and Andy does not want to see Twilight.
No, I don't blame you.
We are not going to see Twilight, so we're limited down to the amount of films that we've got. So it's probably going to be one show, and it's probably going to be about 8 o'clock on Monday night rather than 7:30. So tune in then. And just before we definitely go, when do they catch the shows that you do?
Mine come out weekly. I mean, the British show sometimes it's still finding its feet yet. So sometimes it's every week, but it's definitely once every couple of weeks. Like, so there's 5 episodes up there already. The regular movie show that I do is weekly, and it's generally uploaded on a Monday/Tuesday, straight to iTunes. And that show in particular also goes up to Spreaker, so you can find me on Spreaker as well.
Awesome. So thank you for everybody who's tuned in on the live chat, and thank you to everybody who's tuned in on the download as well. And download not just my show, but From Page to Screens and the British side of it, and you can find all the details because we've just said that. So until Monday, goodbye.
Goodbye.